I wanted to talk about a topic that I've kind of been thinking about. Um, so it's this topic of powerlifting success and how it relates to death. Um, I'm a fan and I enjoy what's his name, Dr. Jordan Peterson, like his videos, and one of the topics that he talks about is like the phoenix and how life is kind of representative of the phoenix, the archetypical character, where it kind of lives its life and then it dies, and then from the ashes it's like reborn and it comes back to life again. um, but for it to continue to live and continue to progress, it cycles, and it has to kind of get to a certain point, and then after that it has to die. It has to literally burn, and then from that ashes the new baby of the phoenix, like the new child, the new phoenix is born. um, so it's a death and a rebirth. And in powerlifting, if you've done it for a while, like it's kind of a similar concept that to achieve true strength, you need to have cycles of death and rebirth, and it can't be just you continuing to linearly grow stronger. It's not like a line like this, but it's like this, and then down, and then up, and then down, and it has to be kind of a death and rebirth in that way. So when you first get into sport, there's kind of a high barrier to entry in that, like, you have to train really hard and you have to drill your training to a certain point that a lot of people can't take themselves to. And you think that it's physical if you're just getting into it, but in fact more of it is mental. That there's that mental barrier of, like, it's hard and like you can't push through the reps, or like it's a certain amount of weight. You kind of have to face your own psychology and trick yourself into realizing that, like, okay, I can do this weight, and in fact it is possible. And sometimes there's more reps, and sometimes it's very heavy weight, and you have to be in the right mind, that, like, you where you push yourself mentally and you push yourself past that past that breaking point, past that barrier where it's really tough, it's really difficult, but you can do this, and that's what holds you back. But after that time, so like a lot of people, that's initially where they get held up, is that they can't break that barrier, and they can't go and say, like, lift 315 pounds, like 315 deadlift, or 315 squat, or a 225 bench. Like, those are numbers that maybe it's in their head, and because of that they can't do it. And if you went by, like, just physics, or like an objective reality, like, they actually have the strength to do it, but up here they don't, in their mind they don't. So there's that. Initially the mental barrier sets you back, but if you continue with the sport and you find that you can break past that, and you can push your mental barriers and you can go for it, then you reach a second plateau at some point where you always go for it. And I remember this, like, 2 or 3 years into training, where, like, okay, I go for 335, I have a 335 deadlift, and then for months I just max out each workout, and then I get to 345, then 355, and then I'm kind of stuck, and I can't progress past that. And at that point, like, it's no longer mental. It's no longer the mental barrier that's holding you back, and it's not just you go and you lift heavy and that's it, and you can hit the weight that you want. At that point there's a new barrier where you have to write out some training, or you have to follow a certain amount of weeks of building up your training and building up your body to get to the point where it can lift that weight. So you in the present can't do it, and just going in any week you can't do it, but it might take 4 weeks or 8 weeks or 10 weeks or 12 weeks maybe of preparation to get to do that weight. And that would mean following some sort of program or some sort of progression where you do it. The classic story is of the guy who lifts like a baby cow, and this is a story, but this is the analogy that fits. Lifts a baby cow up a mountain each day, and when he starts he's very skinny, and then he lifts the cow each day up the mountain, and then after months and many months pass by, the cow becomes like a full-grown like full-grown bull, or full-grown adult calf, and adult cow, and then he's very muscular as a result. The guy is very big and gains a lot of size and strength because he went day by day and carried the cow. And you do the same thing at this phase in your training. You do the same thing. Like, now you can pass the initial mental barriers, yes, but now it's like you designed 8 to 10 weeks of training, and then you do that, and you follow that. The earlier weeks you're kind of doing higher reps and lower weight. The later weeks you're doing heavier weight and lower reps, and you work up over 10 weeks, over like a few months, to doing something really heavy. But the key, and like what I wanted to talk about, is like, just very quickly, that it relates to death in the sense that after that 10 to 12 weeks, when you reach that peak, then what happens then? Your body plateaus. That's what happens then. And at that point, there's a death, and you have to kind of let go of the strength that you've achieved. So, like, let's say you hit like a 340 max. After that, you have to kind of let that go, and you're not going to be able to hit that for another few months, you know. And then you start new again, and then you die and you're reborn again. You build again, you know. And people will see you and you're doing lighter weights in the gym, and it's funny, but you are, because you're building up like a new cycle of some kind, whether that be an off-season cycle or whether that be an in-season cycle. But you're doing some kind of new training so that you can build back up again, and you die, you have to be reborn. And and it's painful to do that, like mentally, you know, to your ego, to your emotions. It's easier to I mean, it's easier to feel like better about yourself by just maxing out all the time, but you don't progress that way, you know. Or there are guys that really like abuse gear, some, and abuse steroids, and then do the same thing and max out all the time, go heavy all the time. You can feel good about yourself, but you don't progress that way. The only way at this point, when you're further up and you're intermediate or advanced, is you have to do these cycles, and you have to have the death and the rebirth. So then you do training cycles where you're working with lighter weights and you build up over time, and then you have to have this. And what ends up resulting is that you have like a personal transformation, both with your body but also with like kind of who you are as a person, and like the kind of inner struggle you have to face, and like the virtues you have to kind of possess. You have to be disciplined, you have to be consistent, you have to kind of be courageous, you have to at times be aggressive, at times you have to be kind of tame and mellow, and there's a whole mix of different things that you have to master to kind of be able to continue to progress. But I think it always ends up being a death and a rebirth. And so it's like, if you want to be a great powerlifter, it's like, okay, are you willing to die? And are you willing to die and then be reborn? And when you go and you face that death, it's not like it's almost like you don't know you're gonna get it back, you know. And even now, like years into training, like almost 8 years into training, it's the same thing. Each time I end that training cycle or I do that meet, like at the end of it, you feel kind of depressed, because it's like you have to work with light weights again. You don't get to lift heavy year round, you know. And it's funny, you guys see like powerlifters lift heavy and like do these crazy weights, but they don't know that like 95% of the year they're working with lighter weights, like at least maybe 60 to 70% of that. Most of the like powerlifting, you get into it thinking you're going to be strong and lift heavy weights all the time, but what it ends up being is that, oh, you lift light weights all the time so that you can lift heavy weights like 2 or 3 times a year, you know. And it's kind of silly, but that's what it is, you know. Like, we're human beings and we can't do super heavyweight all the time, year round, nonstop. And more than being human beings, or more than our own limitations, like why we really can't do that is because to progress, and this is my whole point, is to progress you have to die. To progress and transform, you have to let something go. And in life, in any like kind of personal growth or development, the important questions you ask is like, what are you giving up? Like, what are you letting go of? It's not what you do so much, but it's like what you let go to become who you have to be next, you know. And that can be very painful, and often it's things that you love or you care about or that you don't want to let go. But in letting those things go, that's the only way that you can progress, and that's the only way you can kind of adapt and grow, you know. Part of it's working hard, part of it's working smart, but part of it is being willing to adapt and being willing to die, being willing to let parts of yourself go so that you can continue to progress. I remember the very first time I ever did a powerlifting program, it was really hard emotionally for me, because like I didn't want to let go of maxing all the time. I didn't want to let go of the strength. I saw the earlier weeks of the program and they're working with such light weights, and I was like, okay, I don't want to work with such light weights. Why would I do that? I felt like I would lose all my strength. And then I was doing bodybuilding programs, and same, I was like, I'll lose all my strength, I'll lose all my muscle. I don't want to work with 225 for, you know, like 6 or 7 weeks and like not do anything close to my max. But I let that part of myself die. I let myself do it, and took those risks, and it paid off, and I hit new maxes. And each time it's kind of like that, you know. You have to find new things that you have to give up. You have to take certain risks. You have to adapt in different ways and work hard, work smart, but like really be willing to die in different ways. And like who you are today has to die for the new version of yourself to kind of come forth. But you transform in these ways, and and that's how you kind of progress as a lifter. And I think it's true in life and in many different fields, but it definitely is in powerlifting. And I think it's interesting because training kind of reflects that. And when you're on a certain training program, that's what it is. You start at the beginning, and then you have some goals at the end, and you kind of give a lot of things up, but then at the end, hopefully, if done correctly and you work really hard, you can achieve it. So that's kind of my thoughts. It's just a topic I thought about. For any personal growth, any development, there has to be a death and then a rebirth, and then that's how you continue to progress and grow. That's kind of, yeah, my thoughts on the topic. I'd be curious what you guys think. Feel free to comment anything below, and I'll talk to you guys next time then.